Please confirm if you can hear me. I think we have um, quite a number of persons here. Please confirm if you can hear
I
me.
can hear you loud and clear. Please go ahead.
Oh, also, so we've been having a great, session so far. The last session by my very great friend Katik. I am glad that I would be taking up the session after him. Katik had come and you know finish almost everything to everything, but there'll be some few things to discuss this evening. Um, please confirm if you can see my screen. Um, Let me see. I think I'm not audible, not visible yet. All right, please confirm. Can you see my screen?
Yeah, it's up now. We can see your screen.
Okay, thank you. Let me take this out so this is going to be a very, very brief session. And fortunately, unfortunately, I cannot really see participants. But for the purpose of this session, I would be talking about corporate accountability in the global supply chain of AI system. And I find this very, very interesting. And I'm really hoping that everybody, would be able to flow with the conversation and, ask questions that, you'd want to ask. I also will be speaking more to my slide than, reading the slide. I'll also try all I can to make sure that I'm not too fast so that you will be able to get what this session is talking about. So the main objective of this session, I think we have like 5 objectives. I hope that we'll be able to cover everything to examine the role of corporate accountability in the design, deployment, and utilization of AI system, with an emphasis on the ethical implication across global supply chain, to analyze real-world example of AI-induced harm and discrimination that have surfaced in various industries such as hiring, autonomous vehicles, and chatbots, to explore the shifting responsibility and the challenge of ensuring accountability across corporations, governments, and individuals throughout the AI life cycle, that is the upstream and also the mainstream and the downstream. Would also, I mean, when I mean upstream, it refers to the data sourcing and collection, the midstream, the algorithm development, and the downstream. Downstream is basically for users. So whenever you hear me, because I'll be, interchanging these words, mainstream, downstream, mainstream, downstream. So you should know that the mainstream refers to the building, the downstream refers to the usage. Okay. So to foster critical thinking about ethical, regulatory, and legal dimension of AI governance, focusing on the need for transparency, due diligence, and ethical consideration, and to engage participants in discussions about the practical implication of AI on human life, society, and the global economy, considering who benefits, who is left behind, and who may be harmed by AI technology. I believe that at the end of this session, we should be able to understand the complexities of corporate accountability in the context of global supply chain and the consequence of neglecting responsibility throughout the AI lifecycle. You should be able to identify key ethical challenge rising from algorithm bias, lack of transparency, and insufficient regulation in AI system. You should also be able to understand critically access real world examples of AI failure, such as bias, hiring tools, privacy violation through AI chatbots, and unintended consequence of autonomous vehicles. You should be able to also develop a deeper understanding of the legal and regulatory framework, regulatory landscape surrounding AI system and other supply chain, including the gray area of governance, liability, and contract law. You should also be able to explore the intersection of AI development and human-centered value, considering how to balance innovation with inclusion, safety, and social responsibility, and then to be able to propose some actionable solutions for embedding corporate accountability across all stage of the AI life cycle to ensure more equitable response to transparent AI and deployment. So before I go to this next chart, I want to ask, in how many of us here, I should have made a pool. How many of us here are developers? I want to know people that have like some sort of technical background. You could just do by a show of hands if you have technical background, um, so that could help also in the communication. Technical background, just one. Maybe you could just raise your hand. Okay, I can see just one hand. Okay, three hands. Any other technical background? Okay, you can put down your hands. If you have legal background, let me see your hands. Legal background. Oh, awesome. Uh, oops, not exactly this pole. Maybe not this pole. So if you have legal background, let me see your hands. I can see about three hands. Okay, five. So, oops, the hands are really increasing. Oh, okay. So if you fall in others, let me see your hands. You are not technical, you are not legal. Okay, so we have few persons that are not. So for those that, thank you, you can put down your hands. For those that are technical, do you, if you build AI system, probably you build, maybe you fine tune LLMs, you build probably AI agents. Let me see your hand. You build AI agents. Let me see your hands. AI agents. Okay, just one. Oops. Any other person, probably you build AI agents, you are a machine learning engineer, you probably do Python, or probably you even write softwares. Software. Okay, I can think. Don't worry, you will not answer question, I promise you. If you are scared of me calling you to answer question, don't worry, you won't answer question. Okay, all right. Why I'm asking this question, you can put down your hands, thank you. Why I'm asking this question is that it would help you to understand, it will help us to drive the point home on what you're talking about on supply chain. So some days back, maybe the last month, I saw um, this particular post, I guess on LinkedIn. I should have referenced it, but I cannot recall where I found it. I would have referenced it. And they were using it to, I mean, these days there are a lot of hypes around AI agents. So one of the things I saw here was somebody said they built an AI agent. I mean, they started a company and they have just two persons in the company. And the two persons that are there is the co-founder one and co-founder two. Um, if in the organogram, the corporate organogram or the company organogram, the next after the co-founder, you have the market bot, analysis bot, devco bot, product bot. They are all AI agents. Now, under them, you have the marketing bots, the client bots, the field bots, and so on. In fact, the ops bot, ops usually operations, they are also AI agents. And they said this it's really cost effective. It helps them to um, to answer. I mean, to for productivity and for efficiency. Yeah. Now, this particular incident, I mean, this particular scenario could be a really great thing, but there are the other aspect of it. There are the other side of it. Um, Many companies, many organizations are really enforcing that people within the corporate structure within the organization use AI agents. In fact, there is this global, issue where companies are laying off their staff so that AI could take over such roles. And these are in the news. Big techs, some of big techs are doing that, and they're laying staff off just to have AI replace them. And this could really look, disturbing, and this could be applaudable depending on the lens you are viewing it. But behind all these tools, behind all these um, you know, AI agents behind all these LLMs, I tried to do like a diagram, but the diagram didn't work. So I had to do like a table. And I do a table. Just imagine every applications that you use, every software that you use, every AI tool that you use, especially those that are coming from the global south, right? Not those from the global north. I'm referring to those from the global south. So imagine probably you are using software. Probably one of your colleagues built a particular AI that could help answer health issues. Built an AI that could help answer legal issues. Build AI that could help automate efficiency. AI bots and all the likes. Now, behind all these tools, you will find few things. um, these tools are built by using different components from different places. Like for instance, the data, either they are using common crawl, maybe some website crawl, Reddit, Stack Overflow, news articles, website scrapping, probably scrapping from X, scrapping from LinkedIn using the LinkedIn API, scrapping from YouTube using the Google API, and so on. So you see the data layer. And then some persons, they don't get to do this data work themselves. They outsource it. I know several companies that outsource data gathering, they outsource it. And I think this was, an issue that came up sometimes late last year about unfair labor practice, where, there was issues, right? Companies outsource people from the global south and, hire them as at very very low cost, and they do more of data annotation. So most people actually outsource the data gathering, data annotating, and all the likes. They outsource it from a particular company. Let's say, for instance, country A. Now, once you outsource these guys, they are done. They give it back to you. You have your storage based in AWS, Google BigQuery, probably somewhere in Silicon Valley, right? I'm not sure of where the locations are, but somewhere there. Now, while you have your storage there, you have your compute infrastructure with either Azure, or you're using probably PyTorch, or depending on the compute infrastructure you're using, you have it somewhere. And then in another layer, you have your foundational model, because probably you are using probably a pre-trained, a general pre-trained transformer, that call them GPT, or probably you are using another API from a foundational model. You and the API, the home country of the foundational model are elsewhere, right? In midway, you probably want to use LangChain, LangChain, or you want to use like you're launching for your RAG, or depending on any logic agent you want to use. And these logic agents are um, they are residents in another place, right? And then now you are done with the back end of the work. You want to now build like a front end of, so that the user will be able to interact with it. From the front end, you now use probably React, React web app. You use maybe WordPress. You use maybe Flutter, that's framework, or you use any other framework that could really help you do like some user interface, right? And then those companies those frameworks or those language are built from another place. Let's say country X. No, I think I've used this country W. And then you now want to probably do some users. You now have users that use this particular software, and let's say they're based in country Y. For instance, I don't want to mention a country. So you see that it now becomes a very complex system to be able to put all these things together. First of all, to put them together as to being able to pinpoint, to be able to pinpoint accountability, pinpoint responsibility, because once there is an occasion of harm, you consider, where would you pinpoint it to? Are you pinpointing from where the data was gathered? Are you pinpointing it from the storage? Are you pinpointing from the foundational model that was used? Are you pinpointing either from the middleware you used? Are you pinpointing from from the front end, the softwares, or probably from the user? So it's it becomes complex because of the supply chain. Now, unlike traditional the traditional input, where the traditional softwares where you have like an input, the production and output model. The AI supply chain is a non-nuclear, non-linear, and recursive, characterized by data flowing upward from users to platform, user interaction, corrections, and click. Model flowing downwards from providers to application via APIs, and a feedback loop flowing in both direction, probably reinforcement learning and human feedback. So looking at the way these things are flowing, I mean the way data is flowing, users are using it, let's say from Nigeria, um, from the downstream, and the data is flowing to the upstream, probably to somewhere in Silicon Valley. And then in between the downstream and the upstream, there is a middle interaction that you don't even know which of the places it is flowing to. Where is the API? The API you're using, what country is it flowing to? What country are you getting response to? The fact that you are getting so quick response doesn't mean that it's happening by magic. It shows that the supply chain is flowing. So for instance, let's give an example. A small African startup uses Open AI's API hosted on Microsoft Azure to build a chatbot. The chatbot user data, type query preference correction may be used to refine future version of GPT, um, unknown to the user, thus enriching upstream action. Now, the idea about all this is that, if you look at it now in the bigger landscape, you will discover that this kind of act begins to reinforce some sort of economic and political, or begin to strengthen some people, because in this case, the people at the downstream are unable to enjoy the totality of what the um, the software brings, and those, even the end users, do not even know what happens. Most times end users, both they are both used as either products or labor force contributing to and contributing unknowingly to AI development. And upstream actors, usually big tech, they are gaining from the aggregate of the systems and movements. Also, another big challenge that you have in this instance is that there is a blur background between users, subjects, and co-producers. In traditional supply chain, where producers and consumers are distinct, in the AI supply chain, users can, in some instance, users can be training data, right? End users sometimes can even be, co-producers of model refinements. Communities become unconsenting test beds, and this is usually evident in generative AI, where you have users, input a prompt, and this prompt is flowing towards, model improvements. Also, in instances where voice and facial recognition, that is user biometric, is used as raw data. The chatbot corrections are used as, users feedback, and so on. It now makes it very difficult for um, the power. Maybe I should put it that way. The accountability will, I think that's a better word. The accountability will to dwell in a corporate organization, irrespective of how compliant the corporate organization is, irrespective of how regulatory tight the country is, or the country where the organization is located is. It becomes very tight because there are already structures. The fact that everything is interoperable and interdependent, it makes it very, very difficult to be able to, as a corporation, to be able to, own your accountability wheel, and also, to to comply with regulatory provisions of accountability. For instance, I know that we have I think next week we have a session for cross-border data flow. But for instance, if you look at a typical data protection regulation, it provides that organizations, I mean, in Africa, for the countries that have a data protection regulation, it provides that while some countries strictly restrict the flow of data from their country to other countries. Some provides that, when data is flowing from country A to country B, one of the major requirements for the flow of data is that the country B, that is the recipient of the data from country A, must have equivalent provisions on data protection, on the flow of data. And then other organization, have provisions as to also other countries have provisions as to level of risk, and also the areas of accountability. For instance, in countries that are based in the EU being a very, very robust, a very, very robust legal instrument. First of all, it starts with provisions of the level of risk, and then chain of accountability and the likes. So despite those things exist, because of the flow of because of the AI supply chain, it becomes a bit difficult, and it now looks as if on a scale, some organizations, irrespective of how tight it is, they do not totally understand what is going on, like the bigger picture of what is going on, in when using AI. And irrespective of how they've promised that your data will not be used for X, your data will not be used for Y, irrespective of that, it becomes a bit difficult. Let me not dwell too much here. Now, there are also challenges that that also comes with this supply chain of AI system. For instance, supply chain hides concentration of power behind seamless API and developer-friendly platform. For instance, and this has consequences. For instance, downstream firms depend on black box model. They cannot audit or modify. Countries might have, regulatory provisions as to audit, but most times you can only audit what you can see, and what you cannot see becomes unauditable. But you could tick the box, the regulatory provision box, that yes, I've audited this AI system. Also, upstream provider retain control over model updates and parameters, pricing structure, that is the API cost, the terms of service, and the acceptable use policy. And then users, which are the end users, are frequently, unaware of who built the system, where the data goes, what decisions are automated. And this means that the implication of this is that someone say that it's like we are gradually going through the era of AI feudalism, where feudalism, in the feudal system we have like landlords, right? So we are gradually going to like the AI feudalism, where digital landlord lease intelligence via APIs, and everyone else rent capabilities at cost of dependence and diminish control. Now, I also try to put together like some sort of waves of accountability structure that we've had in the areas of supply chain. For instance, the first wave is where we have like the organizational and technical, which is focused more on the organizational and technical, which is like the view accountability in terms of mechanisms and virtue. When I mean mechanisms in such a way where they provide, there is this audit, framework that you must meet, and then virtue like ethical principles, transparency, accountability, this, that. They view that, and part of the things that they use in this instance could be like model cards, data sheets, audits. But in this instance, the limitations we have to this are technical fixtures without addressing deeper power issues. So you could really fix the technical issues. Probably a user is encountering, let's say, like some sort of racial bias that's happening as to the use of your chatbot or your hiring tool. Yeah, you could address that. But
You
there
said
are
something
deeper.
else. I don't even know what you called him.
Somebody's talking. Can we mute the person, please? All right. So you could really fix the model cards, the mechanisms and the virtue can really help to fix things on the surface level. But let's take it a bit deeper. We have like the structural and the political, which is like a systematic, a bit of systematic and political. I think my PC is down. Let me just plug it before it goes off. All right, we'll go back. So in this instance, there is an issue of Abolitionalism. Let me give you like what this abolitionalism means. They're saying that, oh, there are high risk AI system. Let's abolish them. There's this system. Let's abolish them. There's facial recognition. Let's abolish them. And then there's also governance critique. For instance, they could governance. I mean, release of regulatory requirements. You must sign up with this. You must submit report with these regulatory authorities. But it's even harder to implement because there is lack of institutional support in this area. And then taking it a bit um taking it a bit you know downwards, you go to like a reparative and rational, which is like justice driven and participatory, where they bring up like redress mechanisms, data stewardship, community audit. But in this case, there is a bit of it can be slow to adopt and to implement. But let us take it a bit further. We have like the planetary and future focus. I mean, those that this time around they now try to link this to more like the intergenerational and ecological, for instance, where it refer to carbon audits, AI treaties, and those that are in the long-termism class, in the AI risk, how it affects the climate, affect the waters, and the likes. But most people have really noted that these instances are majorly speculative. I take AI risk. I facilitate AI risk sessions, and part of the bigger things that people have really complained about this is that they are speculative, and most of the proponents of this um, school of thoughts, they make it like it's more speculative, and these are like the arguments. And then people that also, I mean, for instance, in the global south, there is lack of governance infrastructure in instance like this. But let's go to the next. Now, in all this, I see some issues that tends to come up in all this. For instance, the data supply chain. Who collects the data, right? Who labels it? Who owns it? Excuse me, please. Yeah. So who collect the data? Who owns it? Who labels it? Who audits it? In the compute infrastructure, questions that comes up such as who audits, who maintains the servers, the GPUs, and API. For model development, who trains, who fine tunes, who modify the models. Access control, who controls it. You know, and who controls how the model is used and by whom. Downstream use, who integrate the model in real world, and the feedback loop, who provides the feedback that becomes training data, and then governance, who ensure ethical and legal accountability. Now, still on this, I think there was sometime last month where the AWS server, had a bit of glitch, and technically everybody that built their system on the AWS infrastructure had issues. Like they had issues, just like saying that you have like a particular geographical location, and probably you fry like you do like cake, and you are the major supplier of cake, or no, all of you, maybe a particular geographical location supplies cake. Maybe it's known for making cake and pastries, and there's just one person that supplies the flour that is used for cake. When the person supply the flour is not available, it technically means that everybody in that geographical location will not have cake. It's not because they choose not to have cake, but because the major supplier of the foundations of this, right, is not having what it takes to do it. And that's what happened in the global south. There is so much dependence on foundational models, on a particular foundational model, such that when there is any sort of risk that is coming from that foundational model, everybody that built on that infrastructure and layer automatically have issues. And this would help us to change, our perspective when it comes to data governance, our perspective when it comes to AI regulation, AI, AI regulation, either nationally, continentally, globally, and conversations even within the country. Because you need to understand what exactly is the state of the supply chain, the air supply chain of this continent, of your country, of your organization. What's the state? And when you're putting policies in place, you need to, when you're putting structures in place, or you're putting like fact sheet or data sheet, depending on how, or model cards, depending on what you name yours for the purpose of either impact assessment or algorithm audits. That would change your perspective as to what you should put inside these tools. what exactly you should put inside. Because most times you technically do not have control when some AI risk, when there are some orchestrated AI risk, because those risks are not even coming from you, right? There's a limit to the kind of risk you can, handle. And those are risks that falls within your purview. I mean, that falls within what you do. And most times you have even consented, I mean, most people don't even read, terms of use of these APIs and all these things, right? So most times you have even consented to the provisions of those APIs. So you telling the end user, I mean, when you now want to get like an end user, you get like a lawyer or somebody to draft like a privacy policy, to draft like your terms of use and so on. But in the real sense, what is captured in the terms of use or the privacy policies are mere aspirations that is even beyond your capacity to enforce, because the infrastructure you are using are things that are even beyond your control. I just hope that we are getting me, and I hope this is relatable.
We are getting.
Also, I came up with this, and I looked at it that the complexities of algorithmic systems renders regulatory audits provisions a performative gesture in jurisdiction where the AI supply chain is external, opaque, and beyond sovereign reach. So where neither the data, the model, nor the decisions are fully visible, let alone governable. And these are the major challenge most countries face. There is clamor against that. There's several clamor for regulations, several clamor for put this together, put that together. The issue of algorithmic systems can be so complex. I mean, every AI systems you are seeing, every AI agent you are seeing, even your dear either Grammarly, I mean the bigger names that you are using, most of them too, it is really complex to them because they are using API here, API there, this one there. I mean, a whole lot. And this even goes into government too. Government that deploy surveillance system, deploy, digital ID systems, and all the like biometric systems and all the likes. Most of these two things are really beyond their control. So I'm looking at it that the complexities of algorithm system render regulatory audit provision a performative gesture. Just do it, but you do not really have control over the visibility, let alone govern it. Okay, so these are a few recommendations that I have. First, as an organization that you are trying to, bring in AI systems, you're trying to probably adopt AI systems. Few things I looked at is that first, you need to map, the AI supply chain before use. And the action that you want to do here is to conduct like an internal algorithmic supply chain audit before integrating or deploying an AI system. You need to ask some questions. Who developed the model? What data is trained on? What APIs or platform are involved? Where is the system hosted, either geographically and jurisdictionally? This will help you to understand how compliant it or how compactable it is when you put those regulations side by side your regulation. What other parties are involved, or services that are linked. Why this matter is that visibility into chain can help organization access legal, ethical, security risks, even when full access is unavailable. Also, you need to understand, you need to include, accountability clause in vendor contracts. For instance, in this case, you have to, when procuring AI systems or AI service or model, you need to require transparency about the data source, the model documentation, and other known limitations. And this will help you to impute it when you are drafting your own terms of use for the end user. That means those in the downstream. You need to also demand the right to conduct third-party, audits and impact assessments, and also like some sort of clear redress mechanism for end users that are harmed by the system. Why it matters is that shifting liability shifting liability and transparency requirements upstream creates. Oh, no. I think I'm reading this. Shifting liability and transparency requirements upstream creates contractual leverage. So you need to have like some all this should be included in your work, right? When you have the opportunity to do one-on-one or some sort of contracts for vendor, some sort of vendor contract with AI systems or models. Also, you need to implement some sort of internal risk screening. In this case, you use like a risk filtering framework to determine which AI system need stricter review based on the sector, the potential harm, the degree of automation, and the capacity of the supply chain. This helps you to, allocate oversight resource and avoid blindly adopting high risk tools. I also feel that which is really, really helpful is you need to maintain like an API registry. So let's say you have an organization that is coming up with an idea to build a tool that could save the world, right? Because that's like our motivation to have a tool that could save the world. Now, for you to save the world, you need to consider how many APIs do you require and document this API, because this will really help when you have third party, audits or people that are probably those in your AI ethics board. You understand if there's any risk, they can trace the risk and where it is coming from. It could include the provider names, the access credentials and user logs, the update and change history, known limitations, and flagged risk. I'd also think that another thing that would be helpful is that you need to also track the change in their policies and their terms of use. So you can have like a log of that, how things are changed over a period of time. And that would also help you to make decisions whether you want to continue with them or not continue with them. Because accountability really starts with knowing what in your stack. And this is like my last recommendation. You must also build capacity within the organization, which is to train staff to identify algorithmic risk, to also understand supply chain implications, to access critical questions about AI service they use. Because accountability is not just technical, it's a cultural skill set that can be cultivated. And yes, thank you for listening. And I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you very much, Kingsley, for that insightful session. We already had questions before you even finished the session. So this is such a thought-provoking one. Thank you very much. And with your digital hands, please let's appreciate Kingsley for this presentation. It's been a great one. So we have one question in the chat. Please, if you have a question, do raise up your hand. I'll take this one from the chat before we go for the people with their hands raised. So Rex says, how do we guard processing personal data from users from the perspective of the developer? Because based on what you have shared so far, users' data do not go to one source. So that is the question from Rex. Please, Kingsley, attend to that question.
Okay. So, when I was preparing for this session and, I really was thinking about it, the concept of data protection, processor and data controller, it can really be flawed, because at a point you find it very difficult to understand who is a data processor and who is a data controller in the global supply chain context. For instance, you want to build like, let's say a system like a banking app, right? A financial service app, and you want this financial service to be able to do like credit scoring. So for you to do credit scoring, you are probably built a model that you might probably use an API of, an API of a foundational model. Now, at a point, the API of the foundational model, while you can be attributed as a data controller, most times there could be several data controllers within that chain, and there could be several data control processors within that chain. I mean, for a developer, I think what's really important for you is that you need to understand, first, understand the concept of processing data and putting things in place, and this could really help you. And one of the ways you could do this is you need to ask yourself, what data is relevant for this thing I'm doing? Right? So it's not just collecting data, asking people how many kidneys do they have. I mean, some questions that are just unnecessary. So relevancy, you also need to implement security measures. And one of the security measures you could implement could be understanding where your data is resident and what is their terms of use, what is like their the regulation that is governing that, and look at it side by side with the regulation in the country you are domiciling. Most times it can be difficult because you don't even have any choice. For instance, most people have no choice than a particular infrastructure, cloud infrastructure, because of their efficiency. So even if the cloud infrastructure is shaky because of the kind of services they give, you just have to go for it. So I think at your own extent, I mean, at your own, you need to do some the best you can do. I mean, the best that's practicable as to confirming, storage of data, confirming compliance with regulations if there are, and other things from your own perspective. Otherwise, it can really be it's a complex system. It's a complex system. That's my thoughts.
Thank you very much. Rex gave you a thumbs up. I believe that answered his question. So we have, I saw some hands up, but some of those hands have disappeared. So I'll keep taking the questions from the chat. So the next question is from Judge Will, sorry, who says, please, can you speak more on how data privacies are mostly aspirational? I know you mentioned something of that nature towards the end of your presentation. So he wants to learn more about that. Thank you.
Yeah. So that particular statement was made in the context of supply chain. For instance, countries have data protection regulation, and there is strict enforcement within the country. But when you now take the data outside the country, there's limits to what can be done, right? So when it comes to data centers and what the server, the cloud infrastructure server, what they are doing with it, there's limits to what you can really do. There's limits. And I would also give for other examples. You are using generative AI to, by the way, most governments are already adopting generative AI tools, and the foundational model they are using is either they're using OpenAI foundational model, their API, and so on. But there's a limit to what you can really do, and the extent to what you can do is within the context of a country and when the data is being used to what you can see. Why I say it's aspirational is that most times you do not even know what is happening behind the scene because of the complexities of the APIs, complexities of things that happen for you to get the service done. And that is why, I made that comment that most times, data protection can be aspirational because there is limits to oversight, regulatory oversight as to what happens to data. Yeah, I think I am done.
Thank you very much. So we have one hand raised. Keeps coming up and going. Yeah, so we have Francis. I can see Francis' hand. Francis, please go ahead and ask your question. I'll still take some of the questions in the chat, but let's have someone speak. Thank you. Francis, please go ahead and unmute.
Okay, thank you very much for the wonderful session. It was quite insightful. So, stemming from your presentation, it is clear that users, or should I say the common people, or those that are using these AI systems, then they lack the capacity to actually, let's say, to control or protect their own data or how their information is being used. So I remember why conducting a particular research on privacy by design, I also noticed some argument and some challenges when it comes to how the information is being managed. And from your presentation, I would like to infer, or I just want to ask, do you think in trying to ensure that we have a responsible and sustainable AI, is it advisable to shift the burden more to those and organizations that have the capacity, like data controllers and processors, to by design provide some of those features that by default, or they'll provide end users with maximum protection without requiring them to take some steps, as those requirements sometimes they are vague. Thank you.
Yeah, so most times, and that is where the question of, liability and responsibility really comes up. When it comes to supply chain, right, and AI responsibility, I think what you can just say is that you only know yourself, and you know yourself as to the extent of what you have implemented. Because most times, some companies could really say that they complied with XYZ rules, but behind the scenes, they have not. And and this can be really political and could be economical too, depending on the the philosophy of the country, of the organization, So it could really be. But notwithstanding, what the from the end user perspective, I think what I would really advise is there should be what I would call sufficient disclosure to the user. I know most times if you want to do all the disclosure, it could be like a very long paragraph and long, and most users do not read it. But I feel that to avoid shifting responsibility, you need to let the user know the extent of what you can capture as a corporate organization. What is the extent of the risk you have control over, and the one that you do not have control over? Because that would really, when there are any form of any occasion of risk, it could save you. I think that's what it could save you from any form of regulatory or legal action per se. Thank you, Francis.
Okay, thank you. Francis gave you a thumbs up. I believe that answered this question. So the next person we have is MD Mahmood. I don't know if I pronounced that name well, but please unmute and ask your questions. Then we can go ahead and take the rest of the questions in the chat.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Owadara. And thank you for your insightful presentation on corporate accountability in global artificial supply chains. Your discussion on governance challenges and ethical risks is extremely relevant in today's rapidly evolving landscape. As you know, AI systems often draw from multi-layered global supply chains involving diverse data sources, algorithmic components, and service providers from different jurisdictions. This complexity makes transparency and ethical compliance both critical and challenging. Now, my question to you is that in such a fragmented and cross-border environment, what practical measures can organizations implement to ensure ethical integrity and transparency throughout the AI supply chain, especially when upstream partners operate under weaker governance or regulatory oversight? And once again, I sincerely thank you for your sharing your expertise and for contributing to this vital conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Muhammadu. Let me try to probably summarize your question and see if I get it. You were talking about how do we ensure accountability in the face of weaker regulatory provisions. Is that the question?
Yes, yes.
Yeah. Now, it's even when regulation are stringent, accountability could be very difficult. And just as I refer to the last person, the last question is that when it comes to conversation and accountability, you only know yourself, right? Where regulation are stringent, people still fall short of regulations. Talk more of where it is weaker. I think that is where I think I did mention in my slide. Let me see if I can quickly find it out. I did mention about in the wave of accountability where some areas such as, just hold on, the mechanism and the virtue, where it really came up, where organizations like UNESCO, OECD, they came on board to just put some sort of ethical framework, ethical framework or ethical principles, so that the essence of those principles is to really help to while they are not enforceable, they are more persuasive in nature. I think the whole intent of such is to help to guide areas that are having lesser or weaker regulations as to either the implementation of artificial intelligence or the processing of personal data, and also where they are not so much regulatory regime on AI risk, right? So I think for countries that are having weaker regulation, you might want to probably lean on either continental frameworks or principles that are laid out by international organizations that kind of appeal to the conscience, appeal to the conscience of either the user and also the organization, the user and the organization, or the country. That might really help. But regulation is usually the best bet in some instance, at least to give some standard of accountability, and but notwithstanding, you as people, as I've mentioned, accountability starts with you, right? Start with you. You don't have to wait till when there are bigger provisions or bigger regulatory requirements. It starts with you. So yeah, that's my thoughts.
Thank you very much. We have a
All the questions
chat from Rima. Yeah, more questions. You have to get ready because we have like 2 of them remaining. So the first one from Rebel says, my question is that sometimes that since there is a lack of transparency around AI that makes regulation merely performative, is there an alignment that we can achieve right now that will allow regulation to actually be effective? Or is the solution to merely wait for technology to develop and meet our regulatory processes? That's a question from Bernard.
Okay, let me read from my mobile here. Said my question is that since there's a lack of transparency around AI and makes regulation merely performative, is there an alignment that can achieve right that we can achieve right now that will allow regulation to actually be effective, or the solution is merely wait? Yeah, I think this is also why there are several international international conferences just to discuss the question of regulation and technology advancement. While some people have argued that stringent regulation would stifle innovation, I think last week there was particular news about Meta restricting their service in the EU and refusing to sign a particular forgotten the name that talks about building and building. I really can't recall the name of that particular instrument where they refuse to sign it, and yeah, one of the reasons why they refuse to make such the EU AI Act. Yeah, one of the reasons why they refuse to sign that is because they felt that when the one who signed this is going to be it will stifle innovation and to reduce the level of what we are building. But I feel that regulations would always catch up with technology, and that's the truth. And most times I as a person do not really advise constant review of laws. If you look at case studies of Africa, for instance, where to review a law has to go through several processes, either first reading, second reading, third reading, government president assents, and so on. Most times can take like 2 years. And while the regulation is in process, it's before I mean, another technology has come up. So usually, policies could be enforcement mechanisms, could be interpretations, could be other provisions, could be just like the Nigerian Data Protection Commission, as an instance, do often where they release constant implementation guide and so on. So you could also probably use things like probably sectoral policies or just something to just help to that could be easily drafted and could easily adapted. Like it's adaptive in nature, and you could really release it, and you can also alter it to be able to meet up with technology advancement. So that's my thoughts. Yeah, technology will keep going on. Regulations would always want to catch up. Those that are in the those that are in the school of thought of being proactive, like the EU, where you make regulations in advance. One of the things that might happen is most organizations might want to run away from it because they feel that meeting up with all these regulations might almost be possible. So they want to avoid it and to stay there to meet to do. But countries in the global south, where you know that you are still trying to build your technical competence and to be in the AI race, it might be difficult to adopt such philosophy. I don't know if I answer your question.
Thank you very much for that. AI is evolving with the speed of light. She gave you a thumbs up. I believe that answered our questions. And the next one we have, I believe, is a comment. Building capacity within the organization is key. This is a major issue in public institutions in Africa, especially here in Ghana. That's a comment. And the last question before we finally let you go is from Halima Ata. She says, thank you. Please, on mapping the AI supply chain, based on the question asked, like who developed the model and so on. Who do we ask these questions? Thank you.
Okay,
That's the
thank you.
final question.
When you're mapping a supply chain, you need to look, it should be like a, there's a word I wanted to use. It should be like a cross-stakeholder kind of conversation, because your technical team knows the model they're using, the API they're using, the alternative APIs, and all the likes. So you have to look at the question, look at who among your stakeholders have the best answer to them. And that would help to understand what you are going for. And most times, it could be because your company cannot afford some particular tools. That's why they're going for a cheaper alternative. Most times, it could be the choice could be driven by efficiency. Some can be driven by anything. But I think you need to gather the major stakeholder, in the organization to answer those questions. And I think I have one question here from LinkedIn. See, I have it's been announced that our interactions with LLMs are used to train future models. Are these regulations about providing consent? I think if you really can, when you observe that your interactions with an LLM is being recorded, and used as feedback loop. But most times they are really important. They're really important for model improvement. I think you should be able to opt out, and some of them really provide options where you could toggle off using your conversation to train. I know Grammarly does that, where they have this option where you could toggle out. I don't know whether they still have it now, but the last time I checked, they had it, where you could toggle off using the model training its training data based on your interactions with your research. And at a point, some other organizations do have it. So you need to really, and that's why I say that before you, in an organization, looking at the complex supply chain of AI systems, before you recommend systems to be used, you need to sit down and evaluate the system to know what is their concept, their consent, their consent, the complexity of their consent is, whether it's easy to opt out or to opt in, and all those things you need to understand it before you really give like a thumbs up or a go ahead for the usage of such system. I don't know whether it's whether I've answered your question, and I think that's really the end of the
Yeah, that is the end of it.